Okay, so for this, we're going to be just covering general science. We're going to be going over subtest 1 in the ASVAB prep book. All I'm going to be doing is I'm going to read the question, I'm going to read the answer with kind of an explanation behind it. What I want you to do is I want you to use this to kind of test yourself. Try to get the memorization in, and if need be, as you're going through it, after I ask the question, push pause. The pause is going to allow you to have the time to answer it in your own way, and you're just going to be able to get the repetitions in essentially, okay? So just getting started off the bat, the first question is, sound travels fastest through, and then the answers are going to be either air, steel, water, or a vacuum. The answer is going to be B, which is steel. Sound travels fastest in the densest or heaviest materials. The molecule in heavy materials are closer together and transmit sound and vibrations more rapidly than the molecules in light materials. Sound does not travel through a vacuum. So very self-explanatory. The denser it is, the faster it travels through. Next question. In order to use seawater on board ship for boilers, the water must first be A. Distilled, B. Aerated, C. Chlorinated, or D. Refined. The answer is going to be A. Distilled. In the process of distillation, a liquid is evaporated by heat and then condensed by cooling. When seawater is distilled, the salt remains behind as a residue, and the distilled water is very pure. Seawater is distilled before it is used to ship boilers in order to get rid of the salt, which would form a scale and ruin the boilers. Next, the most abundant metal in a free state in the Earth's crust is A. Nitrogen, B. Aluminum, C. Copper, or D. Iron. The answer is C. Copper. Copper is found in combination with other elements and also in a free state. Nitrogen is a gas. Iron is seldom found in a free state, and aluminum occurs in combination with other elements in the Earth's crust. Next question. An object will most effectively absorb the sun's rays if it is A. Polished in a dark color, B. Polished and in a light color, C. Rough and in a light color, or D. Rough and dark in a color. The answer is going to be D, which is rough and in a dark color. When the sun's rays strike a surface that is smooth, shiny, or light in color, the rays are reflected. When the sun's rays strike a surface that is rough and dark, more of the rays are absorbed. Okay, so we're going to go over to the next question. The most effective farming method for returning minerals to the soil is A. Crop rotation, B. Strip farming, C. Contour plowing, or D. Furrowing. Okay, the answer is going to be A. Crop rotation, right? So in crop rotation, plants such as legumes are planted periodically to add nitrogen to the soil after the crops have exhausted it. None of the other methods return minerals to the soil. Next question. An example of a lever is A. A wedge, B. A crowbar, C. A saw, D. An escalator, right? So the answer is going to be B. A crowbar. A crowbar is a form of lever. By placing a crowbar over support, you can exert pressure on one end to overcome resistance at the other. A crowbar can be placed on the surface of the rock as a fulcrum, for example, with one end under the edge of another rock, and then pressed hard to dislodge the other rock. Next question. A lunar eclipse occurs when the A, Earth casts its shadow on the sun. B, sun casts its shadow on the moon. C, Earth casts its shadow on the moon. Or D, moon casts its shadow on the Earth. So the answer is going to go ahead and be C, which is Earth casts its shadow on the moon. The lunar surface is darkened when the Earth comes between the sun and the moon. This caused by the fact that the shadow of the Earth falls on the moon's surface. Okay, so next question. The part of the body that would suffer most from a diet deficient in calcium is the A, pancreas, B, stomach, C, skeleton, D, skin. Okay, so the answer is going to be calcium, C. Calcium is very important. The answer is going to be skeleton. Calcium is very important component of the bones. Without it, the bones in our skeleton become brittle. Okay, so the next question. Which of the following is found in the greatest quantities in automobile exhaust gases? A, sulfur dioxide. B, sulfur trioxide. C, carbon monoxide. Or D, water. The answer is going to go ahead and be water. So D, the oxidation of the gasoline, which contains hydrogen, produces moisture. There is also an oxidation of the carbon in the gasoline, which produces carbon dioxide. Not to mention in the question, and traces of carbon monoxide. The traces can be dangerous when the engine of a car is running in a confined, poorly ventilated place. Okay, next question. Which common electrical devices contains an electric magnet? The answer is going to be A, flat iron, B, lamp, C, telephone, D, toaster. So the answer is going to be C, telephone. The telephone receiver has an electromagnetic magnet with a metal diaphragm mounted close to it. The metal diaphragm vibrates, moves back and forth, and reproduces sounds spoken into the transmitter. The sound waves produced by the speaker's voice cause the transmitter to make the current in the wires weaker and stronger. These changes occur thousands of times per second. These changes in current affect the electromagnet in the receiver at the other end of the phone call. Receiving electromagnet affects its diaphragm strongly or weakly as the current changes. This in turn reproduces the sound waves made originally by the speaker's voice. Next question. In a vacuum, radio waves and visible light waves must be the same. A, intensity. B, frequency. C, wavelength. D, speed. The answer is going to go ahead and be D, speed. Radio and light waves are two forms of electromagnetic radiation. In a vacuum, all electromagnetic waves have the same speed. That is the speed of light. Next question. The most accurate description of the Earth's atmosphere is that it consists of A, mostly of oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. B, entirely of ozone, nitrogen, and water vapor. C, of a mixture of gases, liquid droplets, and minute solid particles. Or D, of gases that cannot be compressed. Okay? So, the answer for this is going to go ahead and be C. C, which is entirely of ozone, nitrogen, and water vapor. The Earth's atmosphere consists of a mixture of nitrogen, about 78% by volume, oxygen about 21%, carbon dioxide about 0.03%, small amounts of rare gases such as neon, xenon, krypton, and helium, and some water vapor and dust particles. Next question. Object A with a mass of 2 kilograms and object B with a mass of 4 kilograms are dropped simultaneously from rest near the surface of the Earth. Neglecting air resistance at the end of 3 seconds, what is the ratio of the speed of object A to the speed of object B? So that one is going to be C, which is 1.1. The answers are 1.4, 1.2, 1.1, or 2.1. The answer is going to be 1.1, right? And all freely falling objects, regardless of their masses near the Earth, fall toward the Earth with an equal acceleration. Any two objects at the rest begin to fall at the same time. Instant will have equal velocities at the end of 3 seconds or at any other interval. Thus, the ratio of their speeds will be 1/1. Next question. In June, a weather station in Virginia City reports a falling barometer and southeast winds. The best weather forecast is probably A, fair and warmer, B, fair and colder, C, rain and warmer, D, rain and colder. So the answer is going to be C, which is rain and warmer. A falling barometer indicates the approach of low pressure and rising air. The rising of warm, moist air usually results in precipitation. We have reason to assume that the air is warm since we know that the southeast winds come from a lower latitudes when the air was warmed, picking up moisture when it passed over the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so the next question. Which substance can be removed from water by filtration? So the answers are going to be A, sand, B, ink, C, alcohol, D, sugar. The answer is going to be A, which is sand. And going ahead, sand particles are visible and comparatively large. They can be caught in the small holes of a filter. Sugar, alcohol, and most inks form true solutions in which the particles are of molecular size, which will be passed through filters. Okay, next question. As a balloon rises, the gas within it, A, solidifies, B, freezes, C, condenses, D, expands. The answer is D, expands. Barometric pressure decreases 1 inch for every 900 feet of altitude. The gas in the balloon expands because it enters the region of lower and lower pressure. Balloons being prepared for the ascent are only partially filled with helium. The balloonists know that the gas will expand and fill the balloon completely at higher altitudes. Okay, next question. The best estimate of the age of the Earth comes from the study of A, the salt content of the oceans, B, the thickness of sedimentary rock, C, radioactive material, or D, the rate of erosion of the land. The answer is going to be C, radioactive material. The analysis of radioactive material has given scientists an accurate estimate of the age of the Earth. Next question. The presence of coal in Alaska shows that at one time Alaska was A, covered in ice, B, covered or connected to Asia, C, connected to Europe, D, had a tropical climate. The answer is going to be D, had a tropical climate. Coal deposits were formed when layers of giant ferns, as well as other vegetation, were compressed into layers of coal by the Earth's movement. Its coal deposits tell us that Alaska must have a tropical climate. Okay, so next question. When an airplane is in flight, the air pressure on top surface of the wing is A, less than the bottom surface, B, same as the bottom surface, C, slightly more than on the bottom surface, or D, more or less than on the bottom surface depending on the shape of the wing. The answer is going to be less than on the bottom surface. The curve in the top of the airplane wings forces the airflow faster over to the top of the wing than below it. This faster flowing air results in less pressure above the wing. The principle behind this was first described by Bernoulli In any flowing liquid, the pressure becomes less as the speed of the flowing liquid becomes greater. Okay, next question. In the human eye, which structure is like the film in camera? A. Pupil, B. Retina, C. Lens, D. Cornea. The answer is going to be B. Retina. The lens focuses the light on the retina, which records the image, sending impulse along the optic nerve to the brain. The cornea is the transparent tissue covering the eyeball. The pupil is the opening through which the light enters the eye. Okay, next question. When a molecule is taken apart by electricity, what two substances are formed? A. Carbon and oxygen, B. Hydrogen and oxygen, C. Oxygen and nitrogen, D. Hydrogen and nitrogen. So the answer is going to be B, which is hydrogen and oxygen. When a molecule is decomposed by electrolysis, it breaks up into hydrogen and oxygen. The ratio is 2 molecules of hydrogen to 1 of the oxygen. So it'll be 2 H2O over 2 H2 up O2. Okay, so the next question. Which of the following statements is true for the right side of this equation? And it looks like Fe plus H2SO4 next to FeSO4 plus H2. So the answer is going to be, there are two elements on the right side. B, there are two compounds on the right side. C, there is an element and a gas on the right side. D, there is compound and element on the right side. Right? So the answer will be D, there is a compound and element on the right side. FeSO4 is a compound of 3 different elements: iron, Fe, sulfur, S, and oxygen, O. Hydrogen, H, is a separate element. Okay, so the next question. The 3 elements found most commonly in commercial fertilizers are A. Calcium, phosphorus, iron, B. Phosphorus, nitrogen, sulfur, C. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, D. Magnesium, iron, calcium. So the answer is going to be C. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen is needed by most plants, nitrogen is needed most by plants. They also have some need for phosphorus and potassium. Only traces of the other elements are needed by plants. They are not a major concern for companies that produce fertilizer. Okay, so the next question. 2 non-porous rocks seem to lose the same weight when a string is attached to each and they are submerged in water. These 2 rocks must have the same A. Weight in air, B. Weight in water, C. Volume, D. Chemical and physical properties. Right? So the answer is going to be C, which is volume. When an object is placed in water, it loses the exact same weight as the weight of the water it displaces. If 2 objects that are placed in water appear to lose the same weight, then they must have both displaced the same amount of water. That means they are equal in size or volume. Okay, and the last question. The thermos bottle is most similar principle to A. Storm windows, B. The freezing unit in an electric refrigerator, C. Solar heating systems, and D. Radiant heaters. So the answer is going to be A, which is storm windows. A thermos is made with a vacuum between its double walls. In this vacuum, there are no molecules to receive the transfer of heat energy from the wall near the contents of the thermos. Thus, the vacuum prevents the loss of heat. Even though a storm window allows some air between it and the year-round window, it is the closest match to the thermos among the given choices. Okay? So, that's pretty much everything for the first subtest. What I encourage, go through all these, and like I said, answer the questions, and as you get through them, push pause before the answer is given so that you can kind of test your memory and get through it. Once you're done, you should be able to go ahead and pretty much quiz yourself repetitively to make sure that you're able to remember and understand and comprehend these answers. Okay?